Mindset, a daily dose of practical wit and wisdom with a professional educator and trainer, Amazon best-selling author, United States Marine, television and radio host, Paul G. Markle. Each episode will focus on positive and productive ways to strengthen your mindset and help you improve your relationships, career goals, and overall well-being. Please welcome your host, Paul G. Markle.
Ho, ho, ho. Welcome back to the Morning Mindset Podcast. And if you're listening to these in order as they are released chronologically per the calendar, it is almost Christmas. As a matter of fact, I believe, if my show notes are right, that this episode will be releasing right before Christmas weekend 2018. And if you're listening to these episodes in the future, well, hello, future man or woman. Welcome from the past. But, and also we will be dark Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. A little bit of Showbiz Ligety for you guys there. We will be dark on those days. So, what was the best Christmas present you ever received? Or what was the best Christmas present ever? People ask this, pretty frequently around the holiday season. People will say, oh, what's the best present you ever got? Or, what have you. And of course, there is the expected answer. You could think, well, if you're an adult with children and a spouse, then you're supposed to stop and think, I should say whatever gift it was that my wife or husband gave me. And then you say, well, they expect me to say whatever the macaroni picture that my child made in first grade. That was my favorite one ever, or what have you. These are the expected answers. Or you could say the birth of our Savior, Jesus Christ, is the best present ever. And that is, of course, something that is expected of you. But that doesn't really take a whole lot of thought, does it? Matter of fact, it takes only the thought of figuring out what other people want to hear. And that's the problem that we encounter in our world is often when people ask us questions, rather than giving them an honest answer, we stop and try and think, what do they want to hear? What do they want to hear? Do they want to hear X, Y, or Z, or is that the actual answer? Now, I thought about this. I gave it some honest thought. What was the best Christmas present ever, or some of the best presents, when you're a child, you get toys and so forth. And when you're an adult, you get practical things like wool socks and ties and underwear and shirts and stuff like that. I got you something that I knew you needed. And your wife's like, I know you needed new underwear, so here you go. They're in multiple colors. But what are some of the best presents I've ever received? Well, I'll tell you. Thinking back to when I was a young child, as opposed to an old child, when I was young, I received a Playmobil, if you guys know what Playmobil is, Knights of the Round Table playset. And if memory serves me, there was either 6 or 8 knights, and they had all the accouterments. It came with, they had little horses and swords and lances and helmets and shields. And there was like a little round, it actually wasn't a round table. It was a rectangular table, but there was a throne. And I'm sure that there was a crown for the king and so forth. When I was a kid, when I was a young child in the 70s, I loved Playmobil stuff. And my absolute number one favorite thing was the Playmobil Knights of the Round Table or whatever it was they called it, the Knights set. And I would sit on, when I got that Christmas morning, I ripped into that thing and I opened it up and I got all the little figures out and all the little horses and everything. And I laid there on the floor of the living room by the Christmas tree and I played with that thing for hours. Why? Because it inspired my imagination. There was no batteries. Nothing lit up. They didn't make sounds. There was nothing electronic about them. They didn't make sounds. They didn't make lights. There was no app to plug in. There was no online upgrade to come up with. Then when I was older, my parents knew that and then I got into the Dungeons and Dragons thing. And so I would go to the hobby shop. I think it was called Hobby Lobby or Hobby Kingdom or whatever. And they had these little lead figurines, dwarves and elves and knights and fair maidens and monsters and orcs and goblins and all that stuff. And of course, when you bought them, they were just plain gray. They were unfinished. And what I did, in junior high, I got the little testers paint kits and I painted them various colors and all that stuff. And my parents knew that I was into that when I was in junior high. And they bought me this set. It was a Roman legion set, and it had all the little legionnaires and chariots and tiny little figures, and you could make dioramas and what have you. And I remember that because I got that and I thought it was fantastic. And I painted each, all the little characters, I painted them and so forth. And I would set up scenes and what have you. And when I was, the thing about Dungeons and Dragons is the original, most kids don't understand this today. They don't realize it because they all have Xboxes or PlayStations or Wiis or PSs or, PPSs or whatever. But Dungeons and Dragons really required a tremendous amount of thoughtful creativity and imagination because it wasn't all laid out and played out for you. I mean, you had your little figures and you had your cards and you had so forth, but most of it was in your imagination. And so thinking about the greatest Christmas presents that I ever received, at least when I was a child, the greatest Christmas presents that I ever received were those that caused me or required me or inspired me to use my imagination, whether it was the little Playmobil set or the little figurines or what have you. And I guess I had an active imagination or whatever you want to call it when I was a kid. But thinking about that, and I would spend hours and hours. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I was probably, I was 10 years old the year that Star Wars came out. And we went to see it in the movie theater, and it was the greatest thing that my 10-year-old eyes had ever witnessed. It was phenomenal. It changed my life. And so I immediately, as soon as they were available, I discovered that there were Star Wars action figures. And so, of course, 10-year-old me, 11-year-old, 12-year-old me, there I am, and I had these Star Wars action figures. And the Star Wars action figures, the same thing, it inspired my imagination. And that's what I would say. Now, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. And maybe your favorite, maybe it was a football. It was a little football. Maybe it was a Red Ryder BB gun. I don't know. I never got a Red Ryder BB gun for Christmas. I was deprived. Although I gave my child one. I was able to give my youngest child, I gave him a Red Ryder BB gun for Christmas many, many, many years ago. At least for me, my honest, thoughtful response to that inquiry, what was the best Christmas present ever? Well, if you're talking about sitting, at the base of a Christmas tree with all the bright lights and shiny tinsel and ornaments and stuff, the best Christmas presents I ever got were those that inspired my imagination. There you go. That is my honest answer to you freaks out there. I hope that you have a wonderful holiday weekend, Christmas, New Year's, whatever it is that you're celebrating. Maybe you're celebrating Leif Erikson Day or what did they do on Seinfeld? A Festivus. How could I forget? Maybe you're celebrating Festivus this year. But regardless, I am your host, Paul Markle, and I will talk to you again real soon.
Thank you for spending time with us today. To get show notes, submit a topic request, and for more from your host, Paul G. Markle, visit morningmindsetpodcast.com. That's morningmindsetpodcast.com. Please leave a review for this podcast on your favorite podcast player. We appreciate your time and effort, and we look forward to reading your honest feedback.